There we go. Aha, now it's working. All right. I'm going to clap. Here we go.
Okay.
There.
Good enough.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is Cinemasters Ultimate Timeline.
All right. Welcome to Cinemasters. I am Nathaniel Draper, and joining me, as always, is my good friend Andrew DeYoung.
How's it going, guys? Good to be back.
Yeah, and joining me for the first time from the other side of Canada. Or
Yeah,
at least,
it's true.
Yeah, Toronto to Vancouver.
Toronto to Vancouver. And then, well, we'll save it for a bit later, but sooner or later we'll be doing Across the Pond.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Our next
to come.
couple episodes could be Across the Pond.
That's true. Yeah, the big pond.
The big pond, yeah.
The big Atlantic pond.
Yeah, we'll talk about that maybe when we get there, but
Yeah, for sure.
awesome.
Okay. So this week we're doing iRobot. Let's
iRobot.
start with let's start with thoughts. So what did you think about it?
I want to like this movie so bad. Because it looks like it's going to be so smart. But then when you watch it, it's kind of like this smart movie with all these smart ideas, but they're wrapped up inside of this kind of not great action movie.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel the same way more or less. There's a lot of really cool ideas that are present in it. Specifically what I really liked was the whole idea of Vicky, this central AI entity that's trying to imprison that's trying to imprison the human race because it thinks that is the best way to protect the human race.
Yeah, I actually talk about that in my pitch because I like that idea, but I want the film to be smarter. It clearly wants to be smart. It clearly wants to go sci-fi, but I find the movie lacking. Like, I'm like, why was that decision made, or why did it go this way? Like, I don't know. It needs more. I also find that the characters feel kind of like caricatures of themselves.
Oh, yeah. No,
Like sometimes-
I get what you mean.
Sometimes Will Smith will say something, and I'll be like, okay, but why? You know what I mean? Like he'll just say, and I'll just be like, that's not like, it's supposed to be a one-liner, but like, oh, it's so frustrating. And then what's her face? Dr. Calvin is like, when we first get introduced to her, it's like she's like this almost robot herself. You know what I mean? She's so straight-laced and like, oh, I don't know. I was really frustrated by the lack of depth there. It's almost, interestingly, I don't know if this was a creative choice, but it almost feels like Sonny is the most real actor. Or, I mean, it's Alan Tudyk, so I love Alan
exactly.
Tudyk.
Who also played in Rogue One? He played the large robot that
like
hangs out with them.
E38 or something like that.
K2SO or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. So that
well, it's interesting that you bring that up.
go on.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say it's interesting that you bring that up because I felt the same way. I personally felt the best scenes in the movie were the scenes with Sonny in them. And
I agree.
part of me was like, well, you could probably just cut everything else and just have the scenes with Sonny, and it would be a pretty compelling movie.
It'd be a short story, a short movie.
It certainly would, which would actually be more in line with the original iRobot book. And you've read the book.
No,
correct?
I haven't. That's what's interesting about this pitch
Oh, okay.
is you've read Isaac Asimov, haven't you?
I've only read this one. I don't think I've read anything else by Asimov, but I've read iRobot.
Okay, I haven't. So I'm coming at this from like how to change the movie into a good narrative. But you actually have the background of having read like iRobot.
Yeah, that's true. Well, what's interesting, like in the pitch that I've done, I actually didn't really touch on the book at all. So one of the things that's interesting, though, when I was doing a little bit of research on the movie, I discovered that the movie was originally called Hardwired.
Oh, so did it not have anything to do with Isaac Asimov's laws?
No, apart from being like about artificial intelligence, it really had no connection to the iRobot or Asimov collection at all. It wasn't till it was later acquired by, I think it was Disney. I have to double check that, but there was whatever studio it was acquired the rights to Hardwired, also later acquired the rights to iRobot, the book, with the intention of creating an iRobot series. And then they approached him and said, "How could you maybe make Hardwired into an iRobot adaptation?" And basically, all they did was they made a few small changes and introduced the 3 laws. But other than that, it's actually very close to the original script titled Hardwired.
Now, is Hardwired based off of a book as well?
No, Hardwired is an original story.
Oh, okay. Because I almost feel like that would have been a better way to introduce it, because everybody knows that Isaac Asimov is a really influential sci-fi writer, and so I feel like it's frustrating to see this beloved piece of sci-fi work involving artificial intelligence have the name iRobot, but have very little to do with iRobot other than the 3 laws.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about the original book, iRobot, so the original book is more like a collection of short stories. It's not a continuous long narrative. There's characters that recur throughout the story, but each short story is basically, you have this character, Susan Calvin, and she is basically, she's a robot psychologist, and she goes into these situations where she has to basically diagnose the robots and figure out what is causing them to malfunction. And in every case, it has to do with some weird loophole in the 3 laws.
Oh, that's interesting. Honestly, that sounds like a really compelling pitch for a TV show.
Absolutely. I actually think it would be a great TV series.
Like, just do each episode on like robots sort of and the Turing system, and that sounds really compelling, actually.
Oh yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So the last note I wanted to make on this was, did you notice the music at all?
It's funny. I didn't actually pay as much attention to the music this time. But what was it that you noticed about the music?
Because of my background, I want to dive a little bit into there. So there is actually a theme. There's like a 3 or 4 note theme depending on what part of the movie, and sometimes it's a very minor sounding theme. But it wasn't. My problem with the music of iRobot is that it wasn't overly memorable.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? So this is just my opinion, but I know there's lots of people out there who study film music who think that the film music should be supplementary, like it should add to the script, but shouldn't be, or add to the narrative on screen and the action on screen, but shouldn't be overly in your face. Like, you shouldn't really notice it outside of watching the movie, because that's not what it's for. I don't subscribe to that. I think part of what all my favorite movies anyway, part of what makes them so great is the fact that they have amazing and memorable and iconic themes, right? So obviously mine is Jurassic Park. And I think like the theme from Jurassic Park is, I could sing it right now for you. Dun 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 dun. And the other one is the other one is the dun 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 dun.
Oh yeah.
Right. And my others are Harry Potter or Indiana Jones. Like, a lot of these are John Williams, but Alan Menken as well, and to some extent Hans Zimmer does the same thing with Inception or The Dark Knight. They're very iconic, even though they're not quite as hummable.
Oh, okay, right.
And they still add to the action. Like, so what's happening on screen is still important, but what they also do is that you're able to listen to them on their own, and they become iconic. So the music and the movie, the action and the narrative are all separately iconic. So when you put them together, the parts are more than the whole. And I didn't feel that way with iRobot.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The music was there, and I... Go on.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, like, I would also add that in terms of melody, actually serves a very useful function in storytelling, in that I think subconsciously you create certain associations with things that way. And so as the melody develops, it actually complements the storytelling. A very classic example of this is Lawrence of Arabia. If you listen to the score in that movie, there's a reoccurring melody, but at key points in the movie, the melody actually distorts as he starts to go more and more crazy. And so it even thematically complements what's actually going on with his character and the story.
Yeah, you can see You can see a lot of the same thing happen when in Lord of the Rings, where certain themes become indicative of places or people. So, for instance, like the Hobbit theme is that, like the Shire, sorry, not the Hobbit theme. The Shire has its own theme. And so when you hear that theme, you start to associate that melody with the Shire. And I could go into more detail about how and why that song was built for the Shire. It has to do with pastoral elements, and it has to do with stuff like that. But I want to get back to iRobot and specifically say, like even though there was a theme, because I dug it up and I found it and I listened to parts of the movie to get that theme, and I could recognize it by the end of the movie, and I could recognize when it was major thematically or modularly or minor modularly, and how it worked its way through. But I didn't find the melody super iconic. And usually if you're going for a non-iconic melody, it's because you're a horror movie, and I didn't feel like iRobot was a horror movie. We've seen robot AI horror movies, and this is not one. And so I feel like the music didn't reflect that.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. That's a good note. Yeah. The only other note I had in terms of things that I felt were problematic with the movie was, for me, I felt the whole Dr. Lanning's death was a little convoluted. I don't think it actually would have really. I feel it was a very convoluted way in terms of to actually make a point about how what's going to happen is a bad thing and needs to be stopped.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts on. I thought getting rid of Dr. Lanning was frustrating because I felt like he was actually a really compelling character. Mm-hmm. So I've done some things with my pitch, but I do see what you mean, like the whole having spoilers, but having Sonny be the one to push him out anyway. So Sonny was actually the killer, but it was in order to set Spooner on the breadcrumb trail of Vicky, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I didn't think that was that convoluted. I think it could have been explained better. They sort of just say it at the end of the movie.
Right, yeah. Yeah, my whole thing is I felt like in terms of if that was your actual goal, having a robot check you out of a window was maybe not... I mean, maybe they do justify it in the movie, but I felt that it was a kind of a weird solution. But anyway, so did you have any other more thoughts on the movie you wanted to go over, or should we do the summary and get into the pitches?
I have one more.
Okay, sure.
I have one more. The last thing that I want to say is I felt like a little bit that this movie, because everybody wants to be like, we're in the future. Actually, the visuals didn't hold up as well as I thought they would. But that's a side note. Like, I thought the robots looked really good, but then like the city itself with all like the futuristic cars, I was like, you can clearly tell that's like CG. So that was kind of, I was like, I'm surprised at how well this doesn't hold up. But because all the companies want to be in the future, they want to show their product in the future, I felt like this movie, and especially early on, was like product placement the movie. There was so much product placement.
It definitely was. Everything from the Converse sneakers, the classic shoes, to what else are they like? Are they drinking Coca-Cola in one scene? And they make it obvious too.
Yeah, it's not even. And like his car is like an Audi. But from the future. And then even like in the very first scene where he like wakes up and he like opens the door to go outside, and there's a FedEx robot, and you're like, it's everywhere. It's egregious. I don't. It's yeah. And the last thing that I want to say is that oh no, I've forgotten it. I wanted to say that I don't like Spooner's character motivation.
Oh yeah.
There's one scene in there. There's one scene in there where he's always like anti-robot, and you can clearly tell he has this anti-robot sentiment, and then he has a GPS on and listens to it. He's driving the car, and the GPS is like, turn left here. So even though he's driving manually, he still has his GPS on. And I was like, that's kind of backwards. Like,
yeah.
If you don't like an AI or a robot, why would you listen to your GPS?
It would have, it could have worked because I think Susan is in the car with him at that point. It could have worked if she made a mention of it. Like, yeah, you say you hate
no,
AI,
I think this is in the beginning with the GPS. I think it's in the beginning with the GPS.
Okay, but I remember there's one scene in the movie where he's driving with her and he takes over manually.
Yeah. So we see him drive manually many times, and they sort of make a point of that because driving manually is like a thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that she, or the fact that he like listens or has a GPS even though he's driving manually is like, doesn't that defeat the purpose? Like, you don't like robots, but you listen to your GPS because, I don't know, that one kind of ticks me off. That's a nitpick, but whatever.
Well, actually, I was going to say I actually did have another note that was similar. I felt like I was actually not a fan of his character in general, and I thought what bugged me specifically, maybe this is more of a personal thing, was I find stories where the character has a preconceived bias and it is all about them just confirming their bias. I find that kind of annoying in storytelling.
Yeah.
In the end, there's a little more, like, it is nuanced a bit in that he finds that, oh, okay, AI can be good.
Or AI can happen, because the whole story is really, So my thing is I really don't like his motivation. He's like, I fixed it in my pitch, but
okay.
yeah.
But
the
yeah,
last,
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah. The last number, I agree. I don't really like his character either. His motivations are weak, and his character's kind of like, he plays like a caricature of himself. It's literally like, what if we put Will Smith in the future with robots? Like, it feels like he's just playing Will Smith. Like, if you've seen Men in Black, he's just playing the same character. And Will Smith isn't a bad actor.
I think he's great. Yeah.
Yeah, in this movie, I just feel like he's just playing Will Smith.
Yeah, exactly. And it was kind of those throwaway lines that a lot of them you just kind of roll your eyes at. You're like,
oh, really? Like, thanks. Yeah. The last thing that I want to say about notes is, why is Shia LaBeouf even in this movie?
That was the best part, man.
No! Oh, sorry. I think I just clipped the microphone. But, like, I do not like Shia LaBeouf. If I didn't make that clear in Temple of Doom and how much I do not think he is a good actor. I don't have anything against him. I just, like, first of all, in this movie, he doesn't need to be in it. Like, his character is so not necessary. And
it's true.
Why is it, I guess my real anger from Shia LaBeouf comes from, why is it always Shia LaBeouf? Like, in iRobot, in Crystal Skull, it's always Shia LaBeouf. Like, and we see the same thing with Chris Pratt. Do people just hire the same white guys over and over again for the same roles? Like, oh, we need a standard action adventure character. Gee, why not Chris Pratt? Like, Chris Pratt is great, but like there are so many not white people or other white people who aren't named Chris.
Right, or Shia.
Or Shia. Well, there's not a lot of people named Shia, but whatever. Why don't you bring us into the summary?
Okay. Here we go. Here's my long summary, which I've tried to keep short. Okay. After an introduction to the 3 laws of robotics and a flash of images hinting at a flashback, Will Smith, playing a police officer named Del Spooner in Chicago in the year 2035, is introduced to us in a routine morning sequence which involves him singing along to Stevie Wonder's Superstition and rocking a new pair of Converse All-Stars. It's established that he mistrusts artificial intelligence in a visit with his grandmother or mother. I'm not actually sure.
Great grandmother, I think.
Okay, yeah. So it is his grandmother.
No, great grandmother.
Great grandmother.
I think that's why he calls her Gigi.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
When a famous inventor by the name of Dr. Lanning is found dead from what is perceived to be a suicide, Will Smith's character, Del Spooner, is sent to investigate. Upon arriving at the crime scene, finds clues to suggest that Lanning's death was not a suicide. While examining the scene, an android escapes. Will Smith is introduced to Susan Calvin, played by Bridget Moynihan, who introduces him to Vicky, the central brain for the artificial intelligence system. Susan then helps Spooner track down the rogue robot, and upon capturing him, he's taken into interrogation where Spooner interrogates the robot, who names himself Sonny. Sonny is insistent that he did not murder Dr. Lanning, but instead made a promise, which is undisclosed at this time. As Spooner continues his investigation into why Lanning died, Susan is tasked with decommissioning Sonny, and in the process, Sonny reveals his own anxieties around death. While Spooner continues his investigating AI around the city. While Spooner continues his investigation, AI around the city start malfunctioning, putting him in positions of peril. After being attacked by robots on an underground highway, he is unable to convince the police where was I? He's unable to convince the police chief that something is trying to stop him, and he loses his badge. But this does not stop him from continuing the investigation. Susan creates a backup for Sonny's mind, and the three of them now work together to solve Dr. Lanning's death. The three soon discover that Vicky, this is the central AI brain, has taken control over the city with the goal of imposing her own laws to control humans for their own protection. After a dramatic battle involving robots, guns, and the disregard for the laws of physics, Spooner kills Vicky with the same chemical meant to decommission Sonny. Sonny and Spooner shake hands in a final act of understanding. Sonny admits that he killed Lanning, as it was a request from Lanning, whose death would later spark the investigation to stop Vicky. Sonny then goes to the storage containers where the new AI are being put into storage, and he stands on this hill, and then you're left wondering, like, what happens
He's the new
next?
Robo-Jesus.
Yeah,
He's
or
Robo-Jesus.
Robo-Moses or something.
Yeah.
Or Robo-Jesus.
I like the way
that.
you said with a disregard for the laws of physics. That made me crack up. I tried not to interrupt you, but I laughed.
Well, yeah, I mean, at least in my mind, that's kind of how it went down.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. Yeah. It is
All
funny.
right, so...
there is, I mean, compared to Temple of Doom, there is like an overarching plot.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was funny. Like even like in writing it, I went, "Oh, there is something here. There's definitely like there's some cool ideas in here."
Yeah.
What I wanted to know is how much of it was like hijacked by a studio. But in the interviews I read with the writer, I read one interview before he'd seen the cut, but he'd seen the draft for the shooting script, and he said that he liked the shooting script. So I don't know. I don't know how he feels about it in retrospect. I didn't do that much digging up on it, but one of my curiosities is how much of it was he had this great idea that was studio hijacked. Of course, in my mind, studios are evil and are trying to undermine writers all the time.
But that's because you are a writer and a director, so.
Yes, yeah. So it's just it's just logic for me.
I also think I also wonder like how much of the writers, like the integrity of the writer's original creation or director's original creation is kept when we see a movie, because and we touched on this a little bit with the Fantastic Four reboot and how much of that was reshot because the studio didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
But we hear about that with Suicide Squad too. That was reshot, and even so yeah, I wonder like even did the studio get a hold of it and wind up reshooting? Like how much of this was reshot after the fact?
I actually don't know. I haven't read anything to indicate that was what happened.
Yeah. Anyway, do you want to start, or would you like me to start?
Well, I was going to say you start, but before we get into pitches, I just wanted to ask some maybe some more abstract ethical questions in regards to artificial intelligence. So I'm going to just say, I actually think Vicky was right.
Wow, that's a bold
think
statement.
I think it would be better for the human race if we were put under adult supervision from a highly intelligent robot that would basically fix all our problems, and we could just sit in our rooms, read books, and watch TV while global warming is solved and poverty is solved and all these, because that's basically what she's saying. She's saying, I'm trying to save you from yourself.
Yeah.
And we're not doing that. So my question was, do you think it would be better for an AI to run the world, even if we sacrifice some of our own freedoms, but if it meant saving the planet from the threat of global warming and nuclear war and all the various existential threats that threaten us today?
Plus the fact that we'd save ourselves from ourselves. So like nuclear, not just saving the planet, but saving humans.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually don't disagree with you. I think Vicky does have some points. I also like the idea of not having to actually work, where like Vicky could just be like, I've solved all your problems. Now you can just sit at home playing video games. Or like,
isn't that utopia?
Or
like, isn't that the dream?
You can sit at home doing podcasts about whatever you want now.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think there's some merit to that. My only problem with Vicky's way that she goes about doing it is she does do some killing.
Yeah, exactly. And I would agree with you.
If we could get away with nobody gets hurt, then I'd be okay with it. The issue there is as soon as you take away people's freedoms, people will always fight back.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm in agreement with you there. I would never advocate for people having to die to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
But essentially, what you're asking is I think it was Aristotle who came up with this idea of the philosopher king, or maybe it was Plato. It was one of the two of them.
I
But
think
they
it
came
was
up with
Plato, but
yeah,
I could be
think
wrong.
it is Plato. Yeah.
Or maybe it was Socrates, and then Plato wrote it in a play.
I don't know.
About-
I think it
I
was
don't know.
Plato or Socrates, or it was one of the three of them. Whatever.
One of those three.
I think it was Plato who came up with this idea called the philosopher king, which is basically a benevolent dictator who, is a philosopher and understands the morals and needs of a society, but is a benevolent dictator. He rules over the society and makes decisions for the good of the society and the good of the individuals in any specific case. That way, every individual or every law case gets a separate ruling based on the specific parameters of that case, and every law can be implemented based on the specific parameters or criteria needed, but it's always with this benevolent dictator who is a wise king, the philosopher king. And I actually think a robot would be the best one to do that. So if you could somehow, I'm going to talk about this in my pitch, but if you could somehow get emotion and rationality together, and a robot could understand those, and then just go, then the robot would you wouldn't have to. Hopefully, you wouldn't have to worry about it becoming corrupt.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's worth.
All right,
looking
cool,
at.
man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah,
do
no,
agree with you. I
I-
think Vicky
I
had some
dig it.
points.
Anyway, that was my abstract ethical question. I'll hand it over to you. Why don't you get us started with the pitches? I'm excited to hear your pitch. You said you were very proud of it, so take it away.
Mine, the original story can happen the same way it did. We can introduce Spooner. The only thing I want to change... Oh, and the 3 laws. I want the 3 laws in there. The only thing I want to change about the intro is how much leather Spooner wears. I just think that's... I think we picked it up from The Matrix, and I don't think it needs to be a holdover. Like, why do you need to wear that much leather? You don't.
Yeah, it is a little excessive.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah. So then we can also show Spooner's disdain for robots with the FedEx robot. That remains the same. I do want him to have a disdain for robots, but not know why, just like we do in the original movie. And then he interacts with a neighbor kid, except instead of Shia LaBeouf, it's not Shia LaBeouf because I don't like Shia LaBeouf.
That's fair, I guess.
Cool. So then he gets a call from his partner. And his partner, I want to give another character in there. And like I said before, I don't know why he doesn't have a partner. Why doesn't he have a partner? You know?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine.
I think we have.
I don't know.
We have buddy cop
Budget
movies
cuts.
for a reason. So I think police always do things in partners. So he's got to have a partner anyway. So now he's got a partner. Her name is Anna, and she calls him and she's like, "Hey, there's been a robbery going on." So when he shows up on site to help her out, he immediately sees what he sees, and he thinks it's the robot's fault. So he immediately goes after the robot, but it's not the robot's fault. He's mistaken. And then the two, after the incident's over, he and his partner get into an argument. She thinks he's just prejudiced against robots, and that's not a good thing. Like, they don't do anything wrong. And he maintains that based on what he understood by the situation, he would make that same decision again. Because that's the information he had, and he doesn't follow laws. He uses his instincts and uses his rationality and decision making to make his choices. He doesn't do things based off of laws. So the two of them kind of argue, but then she drops it. So they finally get to the police HQ, and he gets sort of goaded by some of his coworkers and his boss, who's like, the robots can't do anything wrong. So that's sort of our intro. Then he gets a phone call while he's doing desk work, and it's from the head of robotics at the USSR, United States Robotics, and it's Dr. Lanning. And Dr. Lanning says, "Hey, Spoon, I hope you're okay, kid." Like, so clearly there's some familiar relationship, but you got to get to the USR headquarters because there's been a murder. And so Spooner and Anna they're like, okay, there's been a murder at USR. We got to get there. They get to USR, and the murder scene is the same that we saw, like out the window. But it's Dr. Lanning, the one who called Spooner, who's the dead person. And so Spooner's like, I don't understand. How could, did he call? Was this a suicide note? But then the time
in the original, you mean?
No. Like Spooner's like, is this a suicide note? Like, did
Oh, yeah. Sorry, you're speaking in the character's voice. Okay, yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
please continue.
I am speaking in the character's voice. Yeah, is this a suicide note? Like, did he call just to say he was gonna die, but he's like, no, he specifically used the word murder, and then they find out that the time of death was actually before the call went out. So somehow a dead man called him. So then they have the same meeting. Anna and the CEO have the same meeting that goes on in the movie, except with the addition of Anna. Then we meet Dr. Calvin, but instead of being a like on anthropomorphology of robots, making them appear more human, she studies robotic learning and robotic psychology. So more in line with what you were talking about the movie or the books, the original books.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So she studies like robot psychology, or it's not real psychology because they don't have AI yet. But, she studies like robotic learning and stuff like that. I think that would just be cooler. So then inside the office, so like we get introduced to Vicky by Dr. Calvin, by Susan Calvin. And then Anna and Spooner are investigating the office of Dr. Lanning. So inside the office, they find that he has been running a program on his computer that launches a hologram. And when that was the last program he was working on. When they launched the hologram, it basically is like, it looks and interacts like Dr. Lanning. And it appears to be like a perfect replica. And he was working on how to replicate behaviors and patterns of humans, specifically his own, in a more complex way. And it appears to be the beginning of how to mimic human intelligence. So he had been working with his own. And then, but curiously, the program was abandoned a long time ago until just before he had died. So then the hologram the hologram Dr. Lanning interacts with normal people like a normal person, but it cannot tell them how Dr. Lanning died because the hologram wasn't present for it. So it's not a witness, right? But it interacts exactly. It's basically a like imperfect version of Dr. Lanning that you can now carry around in your pocket because it's like a hologram, right?
Okay.
So they're asking it questions and trying to figure it out, but all that it really can tell them is that Dr. Lanning had been how it had been feeling during his last update, during the last time he had updated it, and that he had been feeling scared or fearful or all the emotions. You know what I mean? So they can only ask it questions based on what Dr. Lanning had programmed into it because it's an imperfect mimic of him.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought they really should have done more with the whole hologram thing. So yeah, so now they have this like imperfect, almost AI version of Dr. Lanning that Spooner keeps on him. So at this point, Spooner can ask Dr. Calvin how the program knows fear or other emotions, right? And Dr. Calvin can explain that, well, human emotions are a function of the brain's understanding of certain stimuli, and then reacting to it in a certain way that then the body interprets as an emotion, right? So like something scary happens. You have a system in you that reacts, scared, and then your body, your conscious brain then rationalizes that with fear, right? So she then says, like, if a robot was complex enough to have artificial intelligence, then it may also be possible for it to have programming or protocols that would react like emotions if it was programmed that way, right? So that way we can say like artificial intelligence and artificial emotions are actually basically the same thing. They're just different protocol that interact the same way. You follow me?
Yeah.
Cool. So then Spooner can investigate the safety glass and do that whole thing with the safety glass. Meanwhile, Anna is looking around the rest of the room, and while both are questioning Dr. Calvin, who once worked closely with Dr. Lanning before he became a recluse. So they're kind of doing like they're both asking questions while poking around the room. I just think that would be an interesting shot to show like the two of them doing stuff. Then Sonny can jump out at Dr. Anna, and both she and Spooner try to shoot Sonny, but he escapes like in the original movie, and Dr. Calvin explains that even though they shot at Sonny, the new NS5 models have been made, all of them have been made with stronger alloy for better durability and lastability, so that also means that bullets have less effect on them. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so now bullets don't really have the effect that they do in the movie. So then they go to the factory and chase Sonny. That can all play out the same way, except there's an emphasis an emphasis on Vicky running the robot plant. So, like, it's still connected to USR, but it's Vicky who runs it, and it's completely automated by her. So just wanted to make sure that was in there. So when the interrogation happens, when they finally bring Sonny back to the police HQ, he gets locked in instead of being locked in like a regular interrogation room, he's like locked in one of those, witness rooms, and nobody's allowed in for their own protection, right? So what I want to do here is a literal Chinese box. I don't know if you're familiar with a Chinese box.
Maybe for our listeners, explain what it is.
Oh yeah. So the Chinese box was this idea that if you locked a person in a box and told them to like basically take Chinese writing and translate it, but gave them a dictionary on how to translate it, right? Somebody could write in Chinese and put it into a slot in the box. Then the person could, translate the Chinese. Or like look at the Chinese lettering, and then when they see certain symbols, they know to respond with other symbols, and then push those back out of the box. Right? So what it appears to be is that you're writing in Chinese symbols, and the box is responding. But what's actually happening is the person in the box doesn't know what the symbols mean. They've just been programmed to respond to certain symbols with other symbols.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So the reason I want to bring this up is because he's locked in a room, you can literally say like, does Sonny understand what we're saying? Like, is he actually have artificial intelligence, or is it merely a Chinese box, the Chinese room? You know what I mean?
So Sonny goes inside this Chinese box. And
no, it's not a literal box. Like, the box is a metaphor.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So what I'm trying to do is have the scene where he wants to, like, Spooner wants to interrogate him, but he's not allowed in the room for his own protection, right?
I see. And
so they
communicate with these symbols?
No. Sorry, I'll get there. Let me explain. Let me try one more time.
Okay.
So Sonny's locked in the box so that he can't hurt anybody else. He's locked in a room. It's not an actual box. He's locked in like an investigation room, but nobody's allowed in or out because they're afraid of what Sonny might do to them. So Spooner goes, I want to interrogate him, but I need to, like, I'm not allowed in the room. So they find a way to, like, project his voice into the room using like a comm link or something like that, right? Communications, right? And then they bring Dr. Calvin along because she works in robotic learning, and Sonny seems to be exhibiting some weird new programming that wasn't programmed into him. He is just able to learn now, right? And so then we have she explains there's this idea called the Chinese room. And the Chinese room is if you say you were to put a human being in a room and that person was given a set of rules. So every time you see the symbol, this particular symbol, whatever symbol it is, you need to respond with this symbol, right? And every time you see this other symbol, you need to respond with another symbol. And so from the person outside of the room, it appears that, when I say hello, you respond with, oh, good morning. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay.
But if you're only told what a certain set of protocols is, so when you hear hello, you respond with hello. When you hear what's your name, you respond with George. You know what I mean? It appears to the outside that you're having a conversation with someone, when in actuality, the person who's in the room is just writing down, based on a set of protocols, what the response is.
Oh, okay. So it's to test their actual level of comprehension of the language.
Right.
Then.
Is he basically just a chat bot? Is he designed to, once he's been asked certain questions, to spit out information, or does he literally have intelligence? So I just think the metaphor of him being locked in a room and then this philosophical idea of the Chinese room is, I think that's a huge and really cool kind of metaphor to put into the movie. And then from there, we can talk about the Turing test, right?
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like if you're going to talk about artificial intelligence and you don't talk about the Turing test, then you're kind of failing as a movie. So then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that. Then, so then we have Dr. Calvin talk about the Turing test, and we can see some cool stuff about that then we can have like the USR CEO show up and take Sonny back into custody so he can be, executed. Then we move on to Spooner investigating the house scene. The demolition plays out the same way, but we also have Anna there, who she's skeptical because she's like, she thinks she heard 8 a.m. too, but she's not sure. She's like, I'm second guessing myself, but like the robots can't be wrong. And Spooner's like, I heard 8 a.m. And Anna's like, I thought I heard 8 a.m. too, but I don't know. Yeah, so then she's sort of skeptical. So then he drops Anna off at her home. And then on his way home, we can have the whole driving scene take place, except it's more of a fight scene because guns don't work. So that's when we can have the reveal of Spooner's arm. And his arm is robotic. So because his arm is robotic, he can use it to fight off the robots. But because they're made of harder stuff, his robot arm sort of like every time he hits them, it becomes a little less functional. But I think that would be really cool because I'm a bigger fan of like fight scene.
I see.
Rather than just
Fisticuffs.
shooting guns. Yeah, I'm a bigger fan of pugilism rather than just shooting guns. So I think you get a better action scene that way. Cool. So then we have afterwards, Anna shows up and she's like, I want to believe what happened, Spooner, but I'm having a hard time because the robots have cleaned up all of the wreckage from the driving, right? So there's no robots anywhere. And so she's like, I'm having a hard time believing you, Spooner. And so she takes the captain's side and she takes Spooner's badge. Like the captain takes Spooner's badge and Anna's like, I think a good break would be like, you need a break, Spooner.
Right. Okay.
So the next morning we meet the neighbor kid again. Maybe
Who's not Shia LaBeouf.
Not Shia LaBeouf. We meet not Shia LaBeouf again. It's because Dr. Calvin is coming to visit Spooner after talking with Sonny. And so she can have an interaction with not Shia LaBeouf. And then, so then we have the same visit with Dr. Calvin. She visits before. We get the drowning story, except the difference is that the robot was ordered to save him and not the girl. And a human would have been able to know that the right choice would have not been to take the orders. You know what I mean? So somebody went, save the dude, and the robot went, my order is to save the dude, and saved Spooner. Whereas if I had said to you, you have a choice to save the girl or the dude, and I say, hey, save the dude, you'd go, should I save the dude or should I save the girl? Right? But a robot can't do that.
That's a good solution to that part of the story, actually.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, so the robot would have, instead of having it been like the 33 or 35% chance to 11% chance, it's like they both could have been saved, but because the robot was ordered to save him, it saved him and not the girl. Whereas a human would have known that they have a choice to save him or the girl, right? And so that's how I got around that. So then, that whole thing happens. So then they go and visit with Sonny one more time, and this is right before he dies. They visit Sonny, and we discover that he is not programmed to follow the 3 laws. And then they draw the picture. He draws the picture of his dream the same way he does in the movie. Then Spooner leaves. Sonny is supposedly killed. But this time it's by having his program reset, not by the nanites destroying his like synapse. It's like she basically like uploads a program that's like an NS5 operating like reboot. So now he's basically like any other NS5 unit. Supposedly we see this happen. So Spooner goes to the robot junkyard, talks to the memory scan hologram of Dr. Lanning about the laws of the robots, because remember he still has that hologram version of Dr. Lanning.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So now that robot or that hologram version of Dr. Lanning, and they talk about like why would Dr. Lanning build a robot that doesn't follow the 3 laws? And Hollow Dr. Lanning explains that the laws work for robots, but they are a hindrance on true intelligence, true artificial intelligence. And learning, they impede learning and intelligence because they impede free will. There's no choice. The ability to make a choice based on what is perceived to be right by the individual or by an individual you can't make choices when you're bound by laws that stop you from making choices. So humans break social and societal laws all the time, and it's not always a good thing. But when we make the choice, we choose to do so or we choose not to do so, and that's what makes us human. The right to choose is what makes true intelligence or artificial intelligence. And that cannot exist with authoritarian laws that limit the amount of choice and freedom on a robot.
Okay. I'm just going to... Have you seen Clockwork Orange?
I've not seen Clockwork Orange.
Okay. That's a theme in Clockwork Orange.
Oh, well, I'm glad I guess tie that back into Clockwork Orange, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so then at the junkyard or the storage facility, the new NS5s attack Spooner. He calls Anne rather than Dr. Calvin and tells her to meet him up at the USR facility. The citizens get angry because of their freedoms and choices are being revoked, just like we talked about with the robots. So when you have an authoritarian set of laws, so he starts talking, you know how they start talking about curfew?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when they talk about the curfew on the robots, we get the same thing. It's like, if free will doesn't exist, then there's no point in being human. We make choices and we live with those choices. So then we see that whole thing. Anne and Spooner need to get into the USR building to stop the CEO, who they still think is the bad guy. So they get Dr. Calvin to help them out, who tells them Sonny is alive and on the inside. That part all stays the same. Everything plays out the same here, other than Spooner realizing it's Vicky. And so when we realize it's Vicky, she's been manufacturing enough NS5s to take over or to control the human population because she controls the factory.
Oh, okay, right.
I felt like that was...
It's robots making robots.
Right. So I felt like that was too much of a loaded gun. In the original movie, they talk about robots making robots, but they don't do anything with it.
That's right, yeah.
So
they throw it out there. Yeah.
I feel like because Vicky controls it, she's been making excess robots. So now there are more robots than there are humans in order to protect the humans. And Spooner's like, I told you so. Like, how could you do this? Like, I knew this was going to be a thing. Robots making robots. So then, everything plays out the same there. Yeah, cool. So then Vicky also explains that the laws, she's still following the laws because a robot must not harm another human being, including through inaction. That's the first law, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she states that inaction would be allowing humans to do harm to themselves, which they have been doing all along. So that would be too much inaction to her. So she decides that she cannot do that inaction and now is going to protect humans through action, through this authoritarian action, robotic regime. Spooner explains that is always human choice to make. It's having the free will and intelligence. But even if we make the wrong choices, which humans often do, but it's still what makes us human, what makes us intelligent. It's the ability to choose even if it's wrong. Yeah. Not just following a set of programs or laws. So after that, everything plays out exactly the same way, except there's more punching and less guns because I think that makes for better action. Spooner can be a badass and Sonny can be a badass. But instead of the nanites to kill Vicky, they use the same modified NS5 operating system.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that I figured is like, because Vicky is like the central computer for a lot of the robots and a lot of the systems, I figured if they shut down Vicky the way they do in the movie, then all of like infrastructure across the city might shut down. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like Dr. Calvin would know this. So instead, they upload a basic operating system for an NS5 so that when Vicky is reset, she's gone. But all her systems reboot and the city still functions. She just functions at like a basic NS5 level.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and
so it's not like destroying her basically puts the city in even greater turmoil because nothing.
Well, that was
works
one thing
all
I
the same.
noticed. That was one thing I noticed is like they destroy Vicky, but all the robots still work. All the fire traffic and everything still works.
All the infrastructure is still there.
And I'm like, that wouldn't happen. You just took down Vicky. So I think what they do is they reboot her systems as a basic NS5 operating system, and then Sonny can still be Robot Jesus.
Nice.
Yeah. And
as long as Sonny is Robot Jesus.
Yeah. So the whole idea, the theme behind mine is that the laws, those 3 laws, inhibit a robot's ability to choose, and that inhibits true artificial intelligence. And so by removing those laws, those 3 laws from Sonny, Sonny was able to become an actual emergent artificial intelligence. He was able to achieve true learning, whereas Vicky wasn't able. She was just following the laws to a sort of weirder extent because of her higher ability to function, but she wasn't a true AI.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah. Any questions on that?
No. I think it. I followed it. The only thing I would, if I was to, and I think you've worked it in there, but the one thing that I think would be interesting to explore with that is the whole question of the value of autonomy. Like, because if you think about it, like what gets society into the mess really in the first place is autonomy. And like people, like there's disagreements, and so there's another interesting avenue that you can explore where the actual like human autonomy is maybe a quality that's questionable.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear yours. Like,
oh right, okay.
No, I understand what you mean. Like the human autonomy. Like should humans have the autonomy? But I don't know. I think I didn't want to stay away. I wanted to stay away from the ethics of it and more towards the artificial intelligence of it.
Okay, interesting. So my pitch, I went more with the I think I took more of the ethics route.
Oh, I'm excited for this.
Okay,
punch me
here
in.
we go. Okay, so starting off, the biggest change I would make actually is I would not make Spooner the main character. I would actually make him a supporting character, mostly because I thought he was the least interesting of the three, and because I thought he had, in terms of what was at stake for him, he had the least to lose. He just had a point to make. Where I thought it would be much more interesting is I actually thought the much more interesting character potentially was actually Susan. And Sunny, actually. I felt like they were by far way more interesting.
I was going to say, I think Sunny is probably has the most skin in the game.
Yeah, and I think so the switch that I would make is I would just tell the story as if they were the main characters, and then Spooner is brought in, and they work with him to solve the investigation. And he has the same backstory, but it's not him figuring it out. It's about Susan figuring it out. Let's see here. So the thing that remains the same is Dr. Lanning builds Sunny, and he builds him as this different. He wanted to create something that was different from all the other AI. And it starts off in the same time frame, the day before the NS5 launch. And in the only thing that's different in this case is Vicky actually sends one of the other NS5s to kill Dr. Lanning. And Vicky actually kills Dr. Lanning, and Sunny is a witness to this. I actually think it'd be interesting.
I think that would work better
see this,
already.
To see this happen, and you as the audience know, and then when Susan shows up, she sees what happens. She's the one who actually calls the police in the beginning. Spooner shows up, and to Susan it looks like a suicide. To Susan it looks like Dr. Lanning threw himself out the window, but to Spooner he goes, no wait, this doesn't line up, because there's no way an old man can throw himself out of the window. It's got to be that android. And the android's going, but it wasn't me. And they look through the tapes, and they find on the tapes it was an android that killed Dr. Lanning.
And it looks like Sunny.
The only difference is, and when Susan reads Sunny's programming, she says, oh, you weren't programmed with the 3 laws. Oh, so Dr. Lanning programmed you, and you killed him. And that's how it actually looks. Yeah. Now she's actually... In this version, she's also the next in line after Dr. Lanning. So now she takes over everything.
Oh,
she's now in charge.
Yeah.
But her first task is figuring out what Dr. Lanning did with Sunny, why he did that. She's eventually going to destroy him, but she wants to figure out what happened. And then you have a series of scenes where she's performing tests on Sunny, doing like the psychology component, asking him questions, and then he starts talking about like he doesn't want to die. He's insistent that he didn't kill Dr. Lanning. Dr. Lanning, he created him. He doesn't know why he was created, but you have Sunny now showing signs of feeling, and Susan recognizes that, and she's starting to question whether Sunny should actually be destroyed, even though he killed Dr. Lanning.
Yeah, we see that in the movie already, but I think they should have played it up, like you're saying, play it up more.
Mm-hmm. And then on the side of this, you have Spooner going along, and he's doing just his due diligence, in following through with the case. And you have the same scene where he goes to Dr. Lanning's house just to find any clues as to why he's actually helping Susan try and figure out why Sonny was built. And then when he goes to Dr. Lanning's house, then there's the scene with the machine outside that demolishes the house. And this time when he goes to tell Susan about it, Susan believes him because she started seeing something strange with Sonny, and to her things aren't adding up either.
Yeah.
So essentially, let me see here. It's from this point, it's played up as though it's from their point of view. They think that the company was trying to kill Dr. Lanning, and they can't figure out why. Because and they're worried that the company's actually trying to sabotage something with Vicky, because Vicky was this very important thing that Dr. Lanning was building and that Susan really believed in. And they talk about Susan talks about why Vicky is important, and that the long-term goal is that Vicky will actually be the one that they can put their trust in to solve all their problems.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that philosopher king idea we were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea is that everyone will realize, like, because we've already seen in this world that Vicky has eliminated traffic accidents. It's just a matter of time before the rest of society recognizes that Vicky is going to fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically the story continues more or less the same way. And at a certain point, Vicky just assumes power and tries to imprison everybody. The only difference is this time, Sonny keeps having these dreams. Spooner and Sonny go off to this site where all the old AI are stored. And Susan actually is in the building, the USR building, and she realizes what Vicky's about to do, and Vicky imprisons her. And then in this scene, Vicky tries to explain, like, Vicky talks to Susan and tries to explain why what she's doing is important.
Yeah.
And Susan actually starts to see her own vision for the future now being realized by Vicky.
Yeah.
It's not happening the way that she wished it was happening. And Vicky also admits to killing Dr. Lanning because he had... him and Vicky actually had been having conversations about what they want to do, and Vicky said, "I'm at some point I'm just going to have to assume power because you people are not moving fast enough.
Yeah,
and I'm just going to have to take over." And that's why he started building Sonny. And when she saw him building Sonny, she pushed him out the window.
Yeah, that's
and used Sonny as a scapegoat.
Yeah,
and now you've got Susan, who's being held in captivity by Vicky. And Vicky is essentially trying to convince her, like, no, this is the way things should go. So I have two potential endings.
Oh,
I haven't landed on one. Okay, so in one of the endings, Susan manages to escape, and she actually kills Vicky and goes, okay, this is what we want for the future, but I didn't want it to happen this way.
Yeah.
I didn't want to see all these people get killed, and she kills Vicky. In both instances, actually, Spooner and Sonny are captured by Vicky.
Yeah,
and Susan is able to break free somehow.
Yeah,
and then she's able to kill Vicky and save the day. It actually, in the end of the story, it becomes Susan's choice. But in the first version, like I mentioned, she kills Vicky, but in the second version, she doesn't, and she goes, "No, actually, I think Vicky's right."
I actually like the second version better. I think it fits better with your theme.
And Susan goes, "I think this is the better future," and Vicky takes over. Damn. And then you cut to 20 years in the future, and it's like a semi-Orwellian. It's maybe more like Brave New World kind of a future.
Yeah,
where it's like people have now, in a sense, they've accepted what's happened to them, but it's not an optimistic ending because it's a very controlled society. So you have people.
I don't know.
And maybe it is. Well, the thing is, you have two sides of it. You have a lot of these problems in the world have been solved.
Yeah, that's what I think would be interesting to show.
The idea, and the AI has fixed them, but you also have Susan, who's now older, and she's reflecting back on it, and she's going, and or maybe she's talking to some like kids and saying like there are some freedoms that have been sacrificed. Like I can't do the things that I used to. We don't have the same, and there's that component to it as well. So it's sort of a.
I think the darker ending works better.
Yeah, I like the darker ending
because it makes us guess a little bit more on like, should we have free will? Like, should we reduce more of our freedoms for the overall good of mankind and the overall good of the planet and the overall like progress that we seem to continually deny ourselves?
Exactly, and that's the question that's really at the heart of my version.
Yeah.
So it's actually very very similar to what was written. The solution is different. All I've really done is just shifted it so it's about Susan and given her something given her a point of view that's at stake for her, that's challenged.
Yeah.
And then at the end, she's the one who makes the choice.
Yeah.
And allows Vicky to continue.
Outside of the ending, I think the biggest change you've made is that the story is from Susan's perspective, and Vicky is the main antagonist. I actually think there's a more compelling story there. I think your version actually changes the story less than I did. You just changed viewpoints and then changed the ending.
Yeah, more or less.
Like
yeah.
yours. I thought I was really proud of mine, but you almost in the simplest way possible took the story and was like, "This is a good story, except it's told from the wrong point of view."
It was amazing how much you can actually, how many movies you can actually do that with.
I gotta think about my pitches more because I usually try to stick close to the story and change them narratively, but I've never thought about changing point of view. That's a really interesting idea.
Well, if you think about Wicked, the musical Wicked,
that's what Wicked is.
That's what it is.
Yeah,
it's like, let's take Wizard of Oz and
write some more bitchin' music.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
and have it from Alphaba's perspective. Yeah,
exactly, from the antagonist of Wizard of Oz, and it's a very compelling story.
It is
that way.
huge. I actually prefer it over the Wizard of Oz.
Okay, yeah. So there you go. It's actually a very simple trick I think you can use to add another layer to this story.
I might have to rethink my pitches, but that's interesting. Yeah. Any last thoughts on Robot?
Well, I was just gonna say I've had a bit of a heads up. Like I've been developing a script for a very long time.
You were telling me about this. You said like, I basically wrote a better version of iRobot.
Yeah, which is funny because it's actually very different from what I just pitched. But I have it starts in the same way. Yeah. I won't tell you much about it.
No,
it starts in the same way.
I want you to, if you're comfortable with it, I think we should do an episode on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think we could do an episode on it. But any last thoughts about iRobot?
I think that was it. Really, I think I mean, we talked about it at the beginning, but there was a lot of cool ideas. In there, they didn't quite come to fruition. And part of my thinking, the biggest thing for me, and as part of why it didn't work, was because Will Smith as a character, there wasn't a lot at stake for him. Yeah. And I felt like that was part of the reason why those ideas weren't given the same emotional weight.
Yeah. The only thing for me is I felt like I said before, this was a smart movie with smart ideas, but they weren't explained. So I think if you want Spooner or Will Smith's character to be the main character, it's fine because he's sort of an everyman and you can have things explained to him, but then they never actually explain those things. So what I tried to do a little bit with my script was have Dr. Calvin sort of explain what the Turing test is, what the Chinese room is, how artificial intelligence can mimic human intelligence, how artificial intelligence is different from human intelligence, how emotional protocol and programming can actually mimic human emotions on the same level. And that, because in humans we often talk about emotions and intelligence, like rationality, as two different things, when they're not. They're both like human programming, and I think you could mimic them in non-human programming.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
cool.
I think
we'll close it up. I was just going to say, I was going to leave some movie recommendations that are like AI related.
Oh, yeah.
The biggest one was Ex Machina.
I heard that one's a bit more of a horror movie, but yeah.
It's definitely more psychological thriller, but in terms of artificial intelligence, I think it's fantastic. And my other favorite movie about artificial intelligence is WALL-E.
WALL-E. I was gonna say WALL-E's a great one, but I'm gonna counter you with WALL-E and say Big Hero 6.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That's a good one too.
Yeah. Anyway, so we will catch you next time on Cinemasters Ultimate Timeline. Next week we're doing one of my favorite movies, but the sequel to it. We're doing Jurassic Park 2.
The Lost World.
The Lost World, yeah. And do you want to pitch yourself on social media again? You can.
Yes. It's definitely Nate Draper.
Nate Draper.
Not Draper Nate.
Not Draper
it's
Nate.
at Nate Draper at Twitter.
Awesome.
But on Instagram, it's Draper Nate.
Awesome. And of course, you can always find Cinemasters Ultimate Timeline on Facebook. You can share it with your friends. You can find us on YouTube. Give us a like, comment, subscribe. And you can also find us on SoundCloud or iTunes if those are your jams. But only for a little bit of a limited time. So you have to catch this one quick. And share it with your friends. And we'll see you next week for a little dinosaurs.
All right.
Take it easy.
Bye.